Hello, welcome to Zeteo's live election night special. How are you all feeling so far? Nervous? It's just past 10 p.m. Eastern here in Washington, D.C. The polls have closed in the vast majority of states, including just moments ago in the key swing state of Nevada. The exit poll is also out and saying the top issue for voters in this country is democracy, above the economy, and that they rank abortion higher than immigration. Not the greatest of messages for a Republican Party, which, aside from running on fascism and racism and sexism, ran on those issues, immigration and the economy. We don't have a president-elect yet, though, in what I believe, many believe, to be the most consequential US presidential election of our lifetimes. And maybe, if the polls are to be believed, is one of the closest elections of our lifetime. We've had polls showing neck and neck. We have one candidate described as a fascist by his own chief of staff and top general, running for election again, having lost in 2020 and then incited an armed insurrection against the United States government. He's also a convicted criminal. We have another candidate who is the first black woman to run for president, who is the sitting vice president, who has refused again and again to break with her boss, the sitting president, on the greatest moral issue of our time, Gaza. So, sadly, genocide and fascism are both on the ballot tonight. Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. And we also have the Green Party candidate Jill Stein and Cornel West among third-party and independent candidates vying for votes in swing states, possibly setting themselves up as spoilers. There is so much to discuss tonight, and I'll be joined by some great guests from across the country. Big names, activists, analysts. We'll be live until 11 p.m. Eastern tonight, and then back again at 11:30 p.m. with California Congressman Ro Khanna and Hollywood's very own lefties Michael Moore and Cynthia Nixon. Coming up in a moment, we'll kick off our live coverage this hour with one of the most progressive pro-Palestine members of Congress, who hails from perhaps the most crucial swing state of all, Pennsylvania. But before I go to her, have you subscribed to Zeteo? Are you one of our nearly 300,000 subscribers across the world? One of our nearly 40,000 paid subscribers? If not, what are you waiting for? Please do go to Zeteo.com tonight and stand up for independent journalism on a night like tonight, where the mainstream media will probably be failing us in some way or another yet again. Support us with your subscriptions because the free press is not free. Okay, plug out of the way. Let's dive into these results tonight as we're getting them. Joining me now to kick off Zeteo's live election special is Pennsylvania Congresswoman and squad member, Representative Summer Lee. Congresswoman, thank you for coming on our live stream tonight. You are in the belly of the beast. You are in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What is going on in Pennsylvania, Congresswoman?
Well, AP called my race, so there's one's down.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. But you know what? It has been obviously a very active, competitive space. We had competing rallies just yesterday. So it has been a lot of pressure on Pennsylvania right now. We just wait, but we heard that there were high turnout. A lot of folks were voting from, I think about college campuses in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and places in between. So I think that we can hope that if the turnout is as high as it is, that hopefully that it would mean that we got, some positive results, however you see positive these days.
Not sure if you saw that story out of Nevada tonight, and the polls in Nevada have just closed, where the Democratic Secretary of State is worried that ballots are being rejected, mail-in ballots, because students sign them with a signature that doesn't match their driving license, because students don't have signatures. They did everything online. And we now live in a world where mail-in ballots might be rejected because young people don't know how to do signatures. I don't know if you saw that hilarious but scary story.
I didn't. I've obviously followed the whole debate around whether we should bring cursive back to schools. And I think that this is what those folks were worried about, as it turns out. But no, I didn't see it. But I mean, listen, whether it's students and their signatures or folks who their ballots are not being counted because, for instance, in Pennsylvania, right, they didn't have it in the secrecy envelope. There are many reasons that Republicans, quite frankly, can use to try to invalidate ballots. And right now, the courts are going to have a busy days as they face challenges as we make sure that everybody's votes are counted. Right? People want to vote. We know that fraud is not an actual statistical thing that we need to worry about. But what we do need to worry about are people who are going to continue to attack, just everyday folks, citizens, trying to do their civic duty in voting.
And even tonight, Donald Trump has been posting about fraud in Philly and Detroit, which led to Philadelphia's DA, Larry Krasner, coming out very strongly and saying there's no evidence of anything. I can't put my finger on what it is about Philly and Detroit that might bother Donald Trump. What could it be?
I don't know. Donald Trump said that he was going to Donald Trump said he was getting folks. So I can't speak to that. But I do find it funny. Obviously, there are commonalities in those two places. But I remember 4 years ago when Donald Trump was saying while Philly was counting their votes, he was screaming about stopping the vote, stopping the count, right? So he has a record of really, really not wanting Philadelphia's votes counted. So I applaud Philly as they conduct their Philadelphia County as they conduct their election. I have faith that they're going to do a fabulous job at it, that all the votes are going to be counted, that there will be no fraud. And Larry Krasner seemed like he meant business.
Yeah.
So I'm certain that we shouldn't have any problems here in Pennsylvania.
You've got Elon Musk spending a lot of time and money in Pennsylvania on Donald Trump's behalf. He's at Mar-a-Lago tonight with Trump, watching the results come in. Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall for that one? How much impact has that money had on Pennsylvania? I'm hearing reports that some of his door knockers weren't really door knocking, they were just collecting checks, that Democrats have actually had a better ground game in Pennsylvania in your crucial state.
I think that's what everyone's hearing, right? Down the ground here, I don't know anybody in Western Pennsylvania who got a door knock from one of Elon Musk's crew. That's a positive thing. We've seen it before, right? Republicans don't really invest in that grassroots, kind of door knocking phone calls. In fact, I don't think that they invest very much in conversations that don't. That aren't on ads, that aren't on social media. And I think that that is a benefit to the Democrats because that ground game here has been, it's been big, it's been massive, right? Democrats from the larger state party, right, the coordinated campaign down to individual candidates at the congressional, the Senate, the state house levels have been out. They've been knocking. Volunteers have been activated. We've seen it here. It's one of the good things when people come up to us and they say, listen, somebody from your team has knocked my door 3 times. I've told them to take us off the list. We're voting for you. And we reassure them that, listen, this is what we got to do. But I think that that's a good sign on the Democrats that they have been knocking, whereas I've not heard anyone say that they've had a door knock from Republicans.
How worried are you about the role that Gaza might play in this election? The last time you and I saw each other in person, we were both at an event with a lot of Muslim Americans in Pennsylvania. And a lot of people in that event were cheering Jill Stein. How much do you worry that the Democrats, the leadership of your party, the president and vice president, by sending all these weapons to Netanyahu, by refusing to put any conditions on aid, by backing everything Israel has done at the UN, in every forum, how much may that depress Muslim American, Arab American, progressive voters, young voters in places like Pennsylvania, but also, of course, Michigan?
It's a conversation that comes up a lot. I mean, obviously, I'm someone who people talk to me about this. I think the thing that I'm most worried about, and I'm just going to be frank, right? I'm less worried about its impact on the election than I am on its impact on Gaza, like on the impact
Well
that
said.
folks right now in Gaza are still living through. That's something that we have to continue to care about, continue to worry about. It's not something that we're going to be able to push aside. And I know that there are a lot of voters who would have, for convenience, wished that this was not something that we were dealing with politically. But the reality is that people are dealing with this in their real lives. And we do it a disservice when we pretend that we don't have an impact, that our administration has not had an impact on the lives of people in Gaza and on their family members here in America, and that those people very righteously are angered, they're afraid, they feel like they've not been listened to, that people have not necessarily wanted them on their team. And we are going to have to answer for that. I think that there were a lot of things that voters have talked about this election cycle that they care about. They've shared with us their concerns, they shared their fears, they've shared the things that make them hopeful. And it's always our job to be responsive to that. It's always our job to have an answer for that. And that doesn't stop, right? I like everybody else, I do not want Trump to win this election. I just don't. But I hope that on tomorrow and every day after this, we are very serious as a party about what direction we're going in, about what our coalition looks like, and that
Yes.
we are not becoming those things that we say that we don't want to be. And that is a real challenge that we're having right now.
Let me ask you this, Congressman. You've been someone who's been quite outspoken on this issue. You've voted to restrict aid to Israel, offensive weaponry. You've called for a ceasefire earlier than most of your colleagues. You've survived multiple attempts by AIPAC and pro-Israel groups to eject you from Congress in the primary process. What do you say? But you've endorsed Kamala Harris. What do you say on the doorstep when someone says to you, I can't vote for this party, genocide's a red line for me? What were you saying to people in recent days?
Listen, I tell folks that it's important that we vote for each other. for me, it's never about the person whose name is on the ballot. I'm not going to say never, right? It's less about the individual's name on the ballot than the people who I'm showing up for. So when I go to vote and I ask them when they go to vote that you vote for the person who is most marginalized in your life, you vote for the person who is most vulnerable, and you keep them in mind. And those are the people who we're showing up for right now. I think that voting is one of the tools that we have in our toolbox. I don't think you should ever use your own tools to harm yourself. So I think that right now there are a lot of people who aren't going to be able to do it, and I don't think that arguing with those folks is important, or even the thing that we is most urgent. The thing that I would rather help people do on those doors is find themselves in this system. What comes next? How do we get there? What are the steps that we need to take right now to have an electoral system that reflects your values? And that is not an easy conversation, but it's one that we have to start having right now. So that's just my process, and I can't really speak for other folks about how they handle it.
Last question to you, Congresswoman. If Harris wins, obviously they will have to talk a great deal about what her policies will look like, what kind of president she'll be. Historically, though, it will be a major moment for the United States of America. Only the second black president and the first black woman president. What would that mean to you personally?
It's incredible that there are so many historic things that could happen tonight, and I feel like I haven't thought much about that. But I think about my grandma, right? My grandma's a black woman, right? I think 83 years old. She never considered that she would get one black president, let alone get another black president, and a woman at that. Kamala Harris would also be the first woman president, and that resonates so deeply with people who have been told that our country cannot change, that our country has no more room to expand to fit the diverse perspective and experiences of everybody in this country. And right, we're never, and it might not be that you get everything you want there, but to think about all of the black folks, the brown folks, our Asian neighbors and family members and loved ones who have not seen this, to see that this is a possible, and that you can also disagree with your own folks in those positions is monumental in that sense. And I think that for me to not have 4 years of Donald Trump is going to be life-saving for people in communities like the very communities of the identities that she represents. It's going to be life-saving for people in PA-12. When we think about the abortion restrictions, when we think about how many mass shootings we deal with every day, when we think about what the Supreme Court can look like for the next generation, those are very real threats that I do not take lightly. It's big.
It is big. And Donald Trump hasn't lost yet. So let's see what happens if history is going to be made tonight. Congresswoman Summerlee, you've won your race tonight. Congratulations. Thanks for taking time out of a busy night to join us on Zeteo. Appreciate it. So that's Pennsylvania, crucial swing state. There are two other crucial swing states in the Rust Belt. Pennsylvania's one. Wisconsin and Michigan are the other two. Joining me now from Michigan, our former U.S. Democratic Congressman Andy Levin, who represented Michigan's 9th Congressional District, and Layla Elabed, co-founder of the Uncommitted movement in Michigan, where it all began. They join me now. Andy, Layla, thank you so much for joining me on Zeteo's live coverage. Let me go to you first. Andy Levin, you have won elections in Michigan. You have represented people in Michigan. What does it feel like tonight in Michigan? What's the mood on the ground?
Well, it's super close, Mehdi. It's not clear what's going to happen. I do feel that we can say that Kamala Harris will win many fewer votes in the Arab American and Muslim communities than Joe Biden did. And I hope she can win anyway, but it makes me very nervous.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are nervous tonight. Layla, you obviously were one of the co-founders of the Uncommitted movement, which began in Michigan, picked up hundreds of thousands of votes in the primaries across the country, turned up at the DNC only to be blocked by the party apparatus, by the Harris campaign, didn't have a speaker on stage, ended up not endorsing Harris, but not endorsing a third-party candidate. What do you make of tonight's election in Michigan? Is this where you thought you would be when you launched the Uncommitted movement?
I don't think that we would be in this moment where it was going to be so close. And I really have to say that being in my community, I went out and voted this morning. I've been talking to voters, I've been talking to my community members. Overwhelmingly, today has been a very painful day for our anti-war movement, and especially for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans and young people who've who right now are feeling left out from their own party. And I just keep thinking that it did not have to be this close.
Yeah.
And I really, I'm really frustrated. I'm feeling very emotional right now. I'm sad and I'm feeling betrayed. And, there is there was a clear pathway for Vice President Harris to win overwhelmingly in a state like Michigan by turning a page away from Biden's disastrous Gaza policy. And,
Yes.
I think this unwillingness to shift on a more humanitarian policy may have, very real consequences. And I think we're going to see that here in Michigan.
Layla, you mentioned that you went out to vote this morning. Do you mind me asking, did you vote at the top of the ticket? And if so, how?
I put a lot of my concentration and a lot of my hope in down ballot races of candidates that, I believe in, candidates that I align with. And I really would have loved to have been part of that voting bloc that, votes for the very first female Black president. I had really hoped for that throughout, our months of
Yes.
campaigning through Uncommitted. And unfortunately, because of Vice President Harris' unwillingness to shift away from Biden's current policy on Gaza, I rooted in my beliefs and my morals, skipped the top of the ticket this year.
You weren't tempted by Jill Stein like a lot of people in Michigan are?
I think voters who are voting for Jill Stein or any other candidate believe that they are voting, their conscience and trying to be strategic in their votes. And I think that regardless, many, many Arab Americans and Muslim Americans and voters in my community went out today, went out during the days of early voting and voted through their pain.
Andy Levin, I speak to Democrats who say, yeah, it's bad that Muslim and Arab Americans have turned on us because of Gaza. We're losing a lot of support. But they also tell me we can still win Michigan tonight without them. We can win through college-educated white women in the suburbs who are angry about abortion. We can win through auto workers who are delighted with Joe Biden's labor policy and are worried about return of Trump. You, as I said, you've campaigned in Michigan. You've been elected in Michigan. Can Harris still win tonight, Michigan, without substantive Muslim or Arab American support?
Well, first of all, Mehdi, a lot of Arab American and Muslims will still vote for Harris. It's not so simple. And there are auto workers who are Arab Americans and
Good
Muslims and so forth. So all these things overlap. I think it'll be a disaster for democracy in the world, for democracy in the United States. I actually think it'll be much, much worse for Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, Palestinian citizens of Israel. Those of us who advocate for them here, Trump says he's deporting us if he can deport us and throwing us in jail if he can't deport us. That's what he has said about those of us who protest. But I do think that Kamala Harris can win Michigan. There are many factors here. There's not only how Trumpy Trump is and how horrifying, he's also very old. Kamala Harris is much younger. She's a new generation of leadership. The African-American female population is excited. The AAPI community is excited. She, has a lot of support. So I think, and I also think that we just don't even still comprehend what an earthquake the Dobbs decision of the Supreme Court is in American politics. Yes. I took my dad's 93 and he and I went to a bunch of senior places. We went to one place, to talk to voters. And we went to one place, there were 19 women and one man. And the guy was a white guy, 95 years old, both a Korea and a Vietnam vet. He had already voted for Trump. All 19 women had voted or were going to vote for Harris. this wasn't like a political gathering, Mehdi. It's like an assisted
Yeah.
living facility, right? And so I do think there's a chance she can win anyway. I'm just the same as I've been since the very beginning of this. I feel like two things line up here. The right thing to do, which is to change course on this war in Gaza that's so horrifying, because it's the right policy for U.S. national security interests, for humanitarian and moral interests, and so forth. But also, it's the right thing for Democrats to do politically. And so I really wish that Vice President Harris had shown more that she will be a different president on this than President Biden was. I hope she'll win and be that different president. But I'll tell you one thing I know for sure. We voted now. The polls are closed here. Today's November 5th. On November 6th, we have to pick back up with our movement of human rights and peace in the Middle East and pressure the president. The problem is, if it's Donald Trump, he doesn't care about us at all,
Yes.
and he doesn't care about Palestinians. And if it's Harris, at least we have a chance to pressure her. Just
I
like
share
the
that
civil
analysis.
rights movement
I
had
share
a
that
chance
analysis,
to pressure LBJ.
Layla, I share the analysis Andy's offering about, at least with Harris there's a chance Trump doesn't care about Palestinians. And yet, what did I see with my own lying eyes on social media a couple of days ago? Donald Trump in Dearborn, Michigan, being applauded by a group of Arab Americans. How is it that there is a minority, it's a minority, but a minority of Arab Americans in places like Michigan who are not just rejecting Harris, but are embracing Trump? Have they forgotten the Trump record? Is Trump just exploiting them? What's going on here?
Yeah, it really frustrates me as a Democrat, as someone who's been leading as a challenge to the status quo of the process of the Democratic Party, that Vice President Harris and her campaign and the leadership of the Democratic Party left open this void for Trump to kind of swoop into our community and blatantly lie to us, and did that, and he was able to do that because of the willful silence of Democratic leaders, leaving that void open for Trump to be able to do that.
And the void, Andy, that Layla refers to is a void that, wow, in many ways, it wasn't even just a void. They didn't just leave it empty. They literally, Andy, went to Michigan, the Democratic Party, with Liz Cheney, with Richie Torres, and with Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton lectured Arab Americans on how the Jews were there first from the time of King David, which is an insane point to make in the middle of a contentious one. You are a Jewish former member of Congress, a Democrat. What did you make of that Bill Clinton speech?
I don't even know about that, Mehdi, but I agree. I agree with Layla, but I also think that we have to be appreciating the full complexity here. The Muslim community in the United States is like the Jewish community and the Christian community in the sense that they have their fundamentalists. And something's been going on for a few years here. The evangelical Christian right has gone to some of the conservative imams and say, you don't like queer people too. You are anti-abortion too. And some of these conservative imams have taken large numbers of people to school boards and supported book bans and so forth. So like when the mayor of Hamtramck supported Trump, that was no surprise to a lot of us here, because the politics of Hamtramck, despite it being a very Democratic city, so you kind of have to run as a Democrat to win.
Yeah.
Some of the leadership there is very right wing on social issues. And of course, they are attracted to Trump. So that's an element of it that we have to throw in the mix, in addition to the problem of the war in Gaza and the way it's been waged and the way the U.S. has funded it and provided the weapons.
Andy, talk to me about the Jewish community in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where Richie Torres was sent to reassure Jewish Americans that Kamala Harris is not anti-Israel. She's totally pro-Israel. And there's been a lot of debate about what are her views, and there's been some comments about her husband who is Jewish. What does a Jewish community, which is largely Democratic, largely liberal, but post-October 7th has been very, concerned about anti-Semitism, concerned about Israel, et cetera, et cetera. You're someone, as I say, You were a Jewish member of Congress, but you were always critical of Israel. And AIPAC were not fans of yours and played a role in defeating you when you lost your election. Where does the Jewish community find itself now, a year on from October 7th, on this election night?
Well, we will see, but I think that 2/3 of Jews will vote for Kamala Harris, whether it's 2/3 to 75%. The Jewish electorate cares about a lot of things. We care about civil rights, about climate change, about reproductive rights, certainly. And so it's not a single issue thing. And I just have to say, Mehdi, that many Jews in America know that to be pro-Israel isn't to be like Donald Trump. I mean, many Jews understand that the only way to have a secure homeland for the Jewish people there is to fully realize the political and the human rights of the Palestinians too. Both are peoples on the land, and these cousins have to come to live in peace together. We have to help them do that, not take sides in a simplistic, cartoonish way.
Last question to you, Layla. Uncommitted played a big role this year in putting pressure on the Democrats to shift on Gaza. Unfortunately, you were not successful in getting what you wanted. A lot of your critics to the left of you are not happy with you. Over the last day or two, there's been a lot of people angry at you on social media saying you sold out the anti-war movement, that you took money from a group that said you couldn't endorse anyone but the Democrats. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to some of your critics who may be watching tonight.
Yeah, I think that like any movement, we aren't insulated from criticisms. And, I think the fact that we were able to run a nationwide campaign on a shoestring budget, especially when you think about this as a nationwide anti-war movement that had a very short runway compared to the billions and billions of dollars that the pro-war side uses. I mean, using $25 million in one congressional race. Even with all of that, I do want to say, I understand the criticisms because ultimately we didn't win the thing that we set out to do. And we built this anti movement within the Democratic Party to challenge and be a direct opposition to the status quo, to the anti, the pro-war, pro-genocide, pro-apartheid forces within the Democratic Party. And a funding entity like Movement Voter Project actually does fund many other organizations, over 500 organizations, some who support nonpartisan campaigns, as well as third party backed candidates. Ultimately Uncommitted's decision to not endorse Vice President Harris, but to recommend a vote that blocks President Trump, and recommend in voters in swing states not vote for third party because of our broken electoral system, was not because it was a funding decision, but it was based on what we were able to build through this anti-war coalition that also happens to live within the Democratic coalition as well. So just understanding where frustrations are, that we thought we would be farther along too. We thought we would win something. We thought that Democrats, the leadership of the Democratic Party, would see, 9 months, 9 months ahead of now, we showed that they were going to take voters for granted in places like Michigan. And they made the calculation that they could try to win. And I just hope that, those Dick Cheney Democrat voters actually turn out.
Yeah, I hope they don't come to regret not having listened to Uncommitted or shifted even one iota on Gaza. Let's see what happens tonight in Michigan. Andy Levin, Layla Elabed, thank you both for your time on this very busy night. Appreciate you both. Interesting what Andy said there about the Jewish community voting for Harris. And they will, and they often do vote Democratic. But Israel, the world's only Jewish state, Israel supports Trump. All the polls show that the Israeli public, by a big majority, would like Donald Trump to win tonight, which I find quite fascinating and telling. So, I know that because a poll was done. And polls have played a very big part in this election here at home. As ever, we're obsessed with polls. The poll showed both candidates, Trump and Harris, neck and neck right up into the lead up tonight. It showed this to be the closest election for years. But is it going to be that close? Are we looking at votes coming in tonight that match the polls? Who better to talk about all of this with than Ryan O'Donnell, Deputy Executive Director at the progressive think tank and polling firm Data for Progress. Ryan, thanks for joining me tonight on what could be a historic night. What do you make of the numbers we're seeing so far? We've had a lot of votes counted in a lot of the swing states like Georgia, like Pennsylvania. Any trends, any numbers jumping out to you that you want to share with our viewers?
I mean, so far, I think, Donald Trump has been able to hold or improve his margins in a lot of the rural counties, especially in the Southwest. He really held things together and outperformed in Florida and parts of Georgia. You would certainly rather be Donald Trump right now in Georgia and North Carolina. Right now, it's going to come down to the blue wall, I would say, for Kamala. That's what we're waiting for. Polls this whole time have said that it's going to be an even race. Polls got it right this time, it seems. A lot of pollsters, including us, said that all of these races were probably going to be decided between +2 for Trump, +2 for Kamala, and that looks like it's about what's going to happen. And so I think right now we just need to keep watching the blue wall and see how that comes in. And that's I would say the hope that the Harris campaign has at this point.
It's interesting that, and just for people joining us right now, Ryan is with Data for Progress. And the blue wall, of course, is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the Rust Belt states that tend to vote together. There was hope for the Harris campaign in the Sun Belt swing states of Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina. North Carolina is what Trump won in 2016 and 2020. The networks have already projected a win for Trump in North Carolina. Why do you think it is the case that some people in the last 24, 48 hours, Ryan, thought, you know what, she might actually win this cleanly on election night? I had experienced people who have run election campaigns before tell me it could all be over by 11:30 tonight, which it almost certainly won't be. The Iowa poll came out at the weekend, which showed her up over Trump in a state that he normally wins by a big margin. What was going on in the last 24, 48 hours, do you think?
I mean, I think everybody thought that Harris was closing strong. I think overall it is going to be, in general, is going to be a good night for polling and probably a bad night for sleep for a lot of us. But I think that the Harris poll the Seltzer poll in Iowa, for example, for those that don't know, Ann Seltzer is one of the most renowned pollsters in the country, tends to get things right all the time. Got things right in 2016 and 2020 when a lot of us didn't. And she projected a Harris +3 margin in Iowa, and it looks like Donald Trump will win that state very comfortably. So I think just in general, also, it just kind of felt like Harris was closing very, very strong. Harris was out doing massive rallies, raising more money, spending more money, and Donald Trump was doing whatever with microphones on his, at his rallies, and so. So I think the vibes were good is the easiest way to say it. And I think the Harris poll mixed with some of that other stuff, I think, made Democrats a little bit extra confident. And that's what we were seeing then.
As you were speaking, Ryan, if we need any more evidence of what a neck and neck race this is, Trump and Harris were at 49.2% each in Wisconsin. That's without all the votes counted. And then it switched the counter from 49.2 to 49.1. For Harris. So now it's 49.2 versus 49.1. This is where we are at 10:40 at night on election night. You mentioned kind of her closing strong and vibes. What about this argument that there is a shy Trump voter, that polls underestimate Trump support in the country, that people don't want to tell pollsters, yeah, I'm voting for the racist fascist dude?
I've never bought that. I mean, have you met a Trump voter? They're not shy.
They're not shy.
They're not. Point. I mean, they loved, I almost wish they would tell me less about it.
Okay.
And so.
But haven't polls in the past understated his support?
100%. So, in 2016 and 2020, pollsters understated Donald Trump's support. And I think that's why there are obviously a lot of eyes on pollsters this time around to see if we could get it right. And thankfully, it looks like we did, for the polling industry anyway. And so I think more probably what happened in 2016, there were way less controls on things like white college or white non-college voters. And, there were way less controls on partisanship in general. And then in 2020, people tried to fix some of that. It didn't really work, but nobody really knew if it was because of the pandemic or not. And now this time, there's been a lot of discourse about polling kind of, over controlling for polls in some ways by, controlling more for partisanship and party registration and recalled presidential vote. But I think that's what pollsters feel like needed to happen in order to be able to call this race correctly. And I think, as you can see, some of the polls that didn't do that were pretty far out there, whereas our polls and other polls were dead even.
We're big fans of the Data for Progress polls. Zeteo has collaborated with Data for Progress to do polling on Gaza in particular. So people watching at home, do check out some of our polling that we've done with Data for Progress. While you were speaking, Ryan, CNN called Iowa for Donald Trump. So Ann Seltzer, the famous pollster from Iowa, she didn't get that one right, did she?
It does not seem like she did. I mean, that was certainly a shot of hopium for everybody when that Ann Seltzer poll came out. But I mean, that's one of them where she doesn't control for those party, kind of famously, and she's been right by doing that in 2016 and 2020. So, she's been very open about that part of her methodology, and she's said, like, at some point I'm going to be very wrong.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be one that right-wingers throw at her for a while. Last question, Ryan. The exit poll that came out earlier showed that the top issues for voters were in order for the national level was democracy number 1, economy number 2, abortion number 3, immigration number 4. That's democracy over economy, abortion over immigration. Economy and immigration both being Republican-coded issues in this campaign, and abortion and democracy being Democratic Party coded issues. Should we read too much into that? Can we?
I think you can definitely read too much into exit polls. Exit polls are, they start off pretty inaccurate, I would say, and then they get more accurate as things go along because they'll use models and projections from real life turnout. And so early on, it doesn't mean as much, whereas like when you get further along, it means more. And, one exit poll does say that democracy is at the top. The AP Votecast, which is the other kind of exit poll, doesn't show that at all. So for me, I would personally trust the pre-election polling on this, which basically just shows that the economy and inflation and just cost is really driving everything as people's top issue.
By the way, I have to ask this one thing as a British American, as someone who covered more elections in the UK than the US in my career. Why is it in the UK the exit poll tells you the result of the election, but in the US it doesn't?
I would love if I could talk to some people that you might know in the UK.
All right, let's do it. Let's get an answer to that question because it's fascinating me for a long time. Why can't an American exit poll tell us the result so we don't have to stay up all night wondering and guessing each race with CNN and NBC? Ryan, we'll have to leave it there. Ryan O'Donnell is with Data for Progress. Thank you for your time and your analysis tonight. I appreciate it. So, Donald Trump, is he coming back? Are we going to have a second Trump presidency? This is the third time he's running for president. As I've said throughout this campaign, all of this year, and since the start of our live coverage tonight, the man is a fascist. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of his chief of staff, John Kelly. Take the word of his former top general, Mark Milley. They say he's a fascist. What does that mean if America tonight elects a fascist to run this country? What does that mean for American democracy? Who better to ask than Danielle Moodie, host of the Woke AF podcast, and Reed Gallen, former Republican strategist, co-founder of the anti-Trump Lincoln Project. They were with me in London recently, where we were debating Trump and democracy on Al Jazeera English with a Trump spokesman. So let's pick up from that discussion. Thank you both for joining me tonight on a big night. And let's talk about where we are today, where it's still neck and neck, and Ryan and I were just discussing. Reed, did you think it might be all over by 11:30 tonight, as some were suggesting?
I think I had a little hope that it might when I was on an airplane earlier today.
Okay.
But, it was one of those things like, maybe North Carolina would go Kamala Harris's way. Like, it was a nice thing to believe, but I never really believed it, if that makes sense. And so, look, I think that this is a 50-50 country. And Mehdi, I think that one thing we have to, understand, is disappointing as this is, and to no one more than me, Donald Trump has become the traditional Republican candidate circa 2024. There are a lot of people who might not have ever really been Donald Trump fans, but they code Republicans. Donald Trump is the standard bearer, and they're going to vote for him. As we've talked about, many times over the years, He gets a massive discount rate on his bad behavior. He's going to get that again tonight. Do I think that he's going to be president again? I don't, but I think it's going to be a lot longer and a lot closer than almost all of us wanted it to be.
Yeah, and it's a very good point you make about partisanship. The idea that you could put up anyone as a Republican or a Democrat, and tens of millions of Americans would just vote blindly for that person, Democrat or Republican, such as the allure and the strength of partisanship in this country. Danielle, does it still shock you anymore that tens and tens of millions of your fellow Americans will vote for this guy who not just did, 2016 and Muslim ban and all the stuff we saw then, and 2020 and insurrection and all the stuff with that, but even the way he's just closed this election campaign in the last few days, saying, "I wish I'd never left office," regaling us with tales of Arnold Palmer's genitalia, calling Kamala Harris low IQ and stupid and lazy as hell, all of those famously anti-black tropes. All of the stuff he's done in the last week alone, just one of those things would have disqualified a Mitt Romney or a John McCain.
They would have, and that's no longer the world that we live in, right? I think that we are living in a place where white supremacy. I said this in 2016 on election night. I said that the election of Donald Trump was white supremacy's last stand. And much like the 100-Year War, I didn't know how long that was going to last. Yes. But that, a joke that a friend of mine, actually, Jonathan Metzl, the author of Dying of Whiteness, says, he's just like, he's like, sometimes I feel like the guy in the 100-Year War that 3 years in is like, oh, is it going to end soon? Yes. And you're like, no, it's not actually. You have 97 more years to go. And so I think that, right now, we cannot continue to underestimate how racist and how misogynist America is. And why would we think that it would change when we do very little to educate the populace and bring people together? I mean, just look at our K through 12 education system and what we teach young people about the founding of this country, about the truth of this country. And then you wonder why we get to this place where we have to try and convince people to vote for their lives and for their safety and for their economic viability, when they're told that if you get rid of the immigrants, if you get rid of the Black family down the street, if you get rid of the Latino family, then you'll be good. You'll be in a better position. So there's no work that they actually have to put in, right? All they have to do is kick those people out. And then, they get to be at the top of the pyramid, the cream of the crop. And that's what Donald Trump has fed them. That's what they believe. And because we have done no work to do otherwise, because we've been too afraid to tell the truth about who America is. I think about this all the time, Mehdi, that I wonder, if what would America have looked like if Reconstruction had been able to last more than 12 years? What would this country have looked like if, following the Civil War and following Reconstruction, we didn't have 100 years of Jim Crow, right? And then we actually taught about what these things did to this country and how it is a emblematic of where we are right now, how these things are not siloed events, right? So I it does not shock me. No, I guess I have my eyes too wide open, or as the right would say, maybe I'm just too woke.
Too woke. Some pretty shocking forecasting read coming from the New York Times tonight. They have just adjusted their election model estimate to say Donald Trump, they believe, has an 87% chance of victory tonight. Nate Cohn, their chief political analyst, I want to read to you what he's saying. He's saying, for the first time tonight, we consider Trump likely to win the presidency. He has an advantage in each of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. To win, Harris would need to sweep all three. There is still a lot of vote left, but in the voting so far, Trump is narrowly but discernibly ahead. What's your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that this comes from the New York Times, certainly, right? If they decide that this is where they want to be and then they're wrong, then, oh, well. And if they're right, then they get to go to the briefing room in January of 2025 and say, we told you were going to win. We were there the whole time. Now, do I think that Nate Cohn's acting in bad faith? I don't think he probably is. But I think it's one of those things where, you just talked to the last guy about polling and all that other stuff. Like, why don't we just let the votes get counted? I don't know at what point getting most of the country anxious, upset, fired up, anything else is really anything other than clickbait at this point, Mehdi. And I would say this too is, I want to extend what Danielle said a little bit on the work that needed to be done, which is for a long time, as even in the last 10 years, as Trump and Trumpism was coming on, most of the country, and I would say most of the political and media elite and the financial elite didn't take seriously not only Trump, but what was growing, in these states, right? Under the Obama administration, the Democratic Party lost hundreds, maybe 1,000 legislative seats. Those places became incubators for not only the kind of stuff we're seeing tonight, but also the kinds of candidates that we're able to fill out and make all this stuff real, as we're seeing in a place like Florida, where nearly 60% of the population wants more access to abortion. But because a Republican governor and a Republican legislature asked people to up the threshold with only a 50% vote, I might add, now democracy doesn't work anymore. And as you know, as you've studied, I think, for a long time, Mehdi, like, this is oftentimes what happens, right? Democracy votes itself out of existence.
Yeah, and the Republican Party, your former party, is very much about minority rule, right? Oh, if we don't have a majority, we'll just change the rules so that a minority still wins. We see that with their support for the filibuster in the Senate, where 51 votes is not a majority in the Senate. You need 60. And now in Florida, where you need a 60% supermajority, as you say, which was brought in with a 50% vote to prevent a majority of Floridians asking for more abortion rights tonight in their vote in Florida. I got to say, though, you talked about anxiety. Danielle, again, you're a cooler head than I am. I'm feeling a few palpitations when I'm seeing 87% chance of Donald Trump victory, and it's only 10:52.
I mean, but I think that the point is being made. We also have to understand that this is being played out like a horse race, that it's being played out the way that it always is because of clickbait, because of the way that corporate mainstream media works. Am I cool right now, Mehdi? No, I'm not. But I have been preparing, I think, for a long time for the possibility of democracy to end. I think that a lot of us have, that saw Donald Trump, that were shocked in 2016, that felt a bit of a reprieve in 2020, but then saw this resurgence come back again in 2024. And I've said it before that if we were to win tonight, right, this is a 4-year lease that we are going to get on democracy.
Yes.
Because the folks at the Heritage Foundation, Leonard Leo at Federalist Society, the MAGA Supreme Court, the MAGA federal benches, the Elon Musk, the Joe Rogans of the world, they're not going to stop. They will find a younger, slicker, more articulate and person with less baggage than Donald Trump, because what they want is a white Christian nationalist country, right? And what these people who have been, who vote against their best interest over and over again, what they believe is that Donald Trump is their Messiah. You can't battle with people. You can't battle facts with people that in their minds have told themselves that Donald Trump is sent here by God. And this is what white evangelical Christians have told themselves, right? This is how they swallow the pill of Donald Trump, because they say that God gives us interesting tools, right, to work with, but Donald Trump is our tool. So when you try then to meet those people with facts and you say, but he's a fraudster, but he's this, but he's that, they'll throw Bible verses at you, right? So if we have placed people in these positions of power right now, where you have, Alito and Thomas on the court that are corrupt, where they have gotten their money from, what kind of dirt and dealings that they're doing, but there's nothing that the Department of Justice can do. There's nothing. Like, this moment then is not a shock, right? Like, because frankly, it should have probably happened in 2020, but because we were in a global health pandemic and he killed nearly, 500,000 people on his way out the door, folks were like, maybe I don't want to die today. Yes. But apparently they're willing to roll the dice 4 years later.
It's a very good point about the lease. We've got a 4-year lease now with Biden, which in many ways he messed up. And even if she pulls it off tonight, it will be a 4-year lease. Very, very well put. Let me ask you this, Reed. Both you and Danielle have talked about the New York Times modeling. Is it clickbait? Is it horse race? Put that to one side. The projections are that he's on course for victory in Georgia. North Carolina has already been called for him in terms of some of these Sun Belt states, which means the 3 Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, become much more important for Harris and the Democrats. You're a former election strategist. You've worked on campaigns. If you had run the Kamala Harris campaign, what would you have done differently to what she did?
I think it's a little bit unfair to try and blame the Harris campaign completely. First of all, they've been around like 12 weeks. But I think the one thing that Mehdi that really I noticed that was striking was that after her very convincing debate performance and Trump's disaster, they went conventional. They went back to being Democrats, and
Yes.
they went back to being a, sort of first do no harm kind of party politically, which is what, from my perspective as a former opponent of theirs, they often do. So they lost the swagger. They lost the Brad Summer. They lost Coach Waltz, right? They decided, okay, you know what? Like, now we're going to play not to lose. And that's, the country was excited about a new option, right? The country was excited about the energy that developed and a tailwind that developed behind Harris when President Biden stepped aside. And if there's something that I think I wish they would have done differently, it was that they would have run a more freewheeling campaign that remained exciting and retained its excitement and didn't worry about, how are we testing our ads, right? How many polls are we going to run on something, right? That they would have had some excitement and really pushed a change narrative, right? Push the turning the page, push the better narrative. We are better than this, as Danielle said. And I think Danielle might have been crawling around in my cranium because everything she said about the last 4 years and potentially the next 4 years if Harris is able to win is 100% right. Like, the bad guys are not going to fold up their tents if Trump does lose tonight.
Yeah.
They are going
Agreed.
to double down. And in fact, I would say that they would venture to make Kamala Harris as unpopular as they can, as quickly as they can, if she takes office, for exactly what Danielle said, which is finding a J.D. Vance type guy to run through the car wash and make palatable. Because as we said at the top, Mehdi, we only have two parties, right? And a lot of the people I talked to when I was on the ground, right, they don't have an emotional connection to either party. One gentleman in a tough neighborhood in Grand Rapids said, "I'll vote for Harris because she's the lesser of two evils," right? That is not a strong democracy. That is not a strong two-party system. That is a lot of voters who don't believe it matters either way. And I think if Trump does win tonight, which is possible, I think it will be because of antipathy on a lot of people on the right and apathy on a lot of people in the middle.
Well said, Reed. Well said. Last word to you, Danielle. If the Democrats do lose, some people are under some kind of illusion that they're going to become progressive and left-wing and anti-war. That's not the case, is it? I suspect they'll become more right-wing and say we weren't right-wing and anti-woke enough for the country. The country wants people like Trump. We need to be more right-wing.
So I'm going to be very honest, which is that if Donald Trump wins, the Democrats won't need to worry about what kind of party they're going to be because they won't exist. Because fundamentally, this country will be undone in the course of the first 100 days. And whatever measure, whatever guardrail, whatever bounce back people think would happen in a 2028 is not going to happen. So the plans will change. And folks need to really prepare for that reality because there is no we'll get them next time. This has been the point that we have been making since 2016. Right. This has been the drum that I have personally been beating, and I know that you and Reed and others have been beating. There is no second bite at the apple here. They have a plan to move on day one. So I honestly I don't know what Democrats do. We already function in a one-party system right now because the other party is a cult. And if the cult takes over the country, then I'm not quite sure what the options are, except to, leave. I have no idea.
Well, the cult hasn't taken over quite yet. It is 11 p.m. on election night. Let's see if the New York Times is right or wrong in its simulations. We will be watching the results all night long. Reed and Danielle, thank you for joining me at the end of this hour. Appreciate your analysis, as stark and as depressing as it may be to some of you. That's our show for now, but don't count us out for the night just yet. It's a long night. And we don't have a result yet. And we're not going to have a result for a while. So I will be back very soon. I'll be talking to Michael Moore. I'll be speaking to Cynthia Nixon. I'll be speaking to Congressman Ro Khanna in the next hour at around 11:30 p.m. Eastern. Come back and join us. If you've enjoyed this chat, remember, this is what you're getting as a subscriber to our YouTube channel. Imagine how much more you could get if you were a paid subscriber to our Substack, to Zeteo.com. So please do consider becoming a paid subscriber tonight. Support our journalism, our analysis, the kind of guests and conversations we have. Head over to Zeteo.com, Zeteo.com, become a subscriber, and then come back here at 11:30 where we'll be carrying on our discussions and looking at the results as they come in. A big night, a historic night. See you soon. Welcome back to Zeteo's election night special coverage, live coverage of the 60th presidential election. We were on air earlier. We spoke to a bunch of interesting people. We've got some more interesting people between now and midnight, but I just want to give you an update where we are. People are pretty stressed right now. People who are worried about the prospect of a Trump presidency are pretty anxious right now. The New York Times, their live presidential forecast, I'm looking at it right now, they're saying 89% chance of a Trump victory, of a Trump win tonight. Not looking good for the Democrats, according to the New York Times election modeling. Of course, we still don't know what's going to happen in the key Rust Belt swing states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So let's talk about where we are tonight. If the Democrats are losing, why are they losing? And what a Trump presidency might look like, excuse me. We kick off the second part of our election night stream with a very familiar face to anyone who's been watching Mehdi Unfiltered recently. Joining me now is Academy Award-winning filmmaker, Emmy Award-winning TV host, originally from Michigan, joining me from New York, Michael Moore. Michael, thank you for coming on tonight. I remember you in 2016 being the person who predicted Trump. Are you predicting another Trump victory tonight?
Yeah. I never signed up to be in the prediction business, but I'll say this much: everything that I've heard so far is saying that it's going to be very close, and nobody can call it yet.
Yeah.
So I'm not a Democrat. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I've never been a dues-paying member of the Democratic Party because I'm not a wimp. I'm a fighter. There's a high school in our state capital in Lansing, right next to, it's the next high school over from where Magic Johnson went to high school. And it's called Lansing Eastern High School. And their mascot is the Quakers, the fighting Quakers. That's who we are. And so I would not sit here right now and have any kind of discussion with you that would imply that we're still not going to be victorious. I've said, everybody's said, I think, it's not just me, this is going to come down to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the three Great Lakes states that are and were and somewhat still are, but not really, the backbone of our industrial strength here in America. But a lot of people get excited about Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona, and Nevada, and God bless them all. But we're just at the place where we always thought we would be, and it's either, depending on what minute you're looking at the numbers, it's tied right now, or we're the state that's right now the most ahead is Michigan, and it's like a 0.1% ahead, I think, in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. It's ridiculous to even spend any time tonight. I know so many people are so nervous. They're watching you and I right now. They are freaking out. Yeah. Do not freak out. Everybody take a big, deep breath. There's more of us than there are of them. They can't change that. The majority of Americans are with us.
So
go down every issue. The Americans are with us. So
I agree with you on the policy issues that you and I care about, like healthcare, Gaza, and other issues. And I've always been able to say, well, Donald Trump may have won the presidential election, but he won it with the Electoral College. He lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by 3 million votes. He lost the popular vote in 2020 to Joe Biden by 7 million votes? He's never actually won the popular vote. Tonight, people are saying he could win the popular vote too, which would really, would help his ego, but it would really make me think long and hard about what kind of country we're living in if a majority of voters are supporting
because
this man is so openly fascist and racist.
Yeah, we have such a crazy system where it should just be the popular vote. But back in 2000, Gore wins the popular vote. Back in 2016, Hillary wins it, and they don't become president.
Yeah.
And people have, there's been some good research and thinking in the last couple of weeks that, it's possible that Trump could win the popular vote, but lose the Electoral College. And, there's just something about the karma of that.
Yes.
That sounds so good that finally the other side's going to learn and agree with us and work with us to get rid of the Electoral College, because now they're going to get burned by it.
Well,
so to your point, why you're bringing this up is how can it be that so many of our fellow Americans are for this guy? It's the big unanswered question, and it's the most asked question in this country and by people who live in other countries. Please explain this to us. And what I say to liberals and Democrats is, well, until we can actually answer that question and take the time to figure it out, we're going to still find ourselves in this awful position. We really should try to answer it. And there is an answer.
So let me ask.
But it will take some really smart thinking.
Well, there's a smart guy waiting to join us on this panel, and he's a Democrat too. Congressman Ro Khanna from California, I believe, is around to join us now live on the Zeteo
Ro, are you there?
Coverage.
Ro, have you paid your party dues? Have you paid your party dues? Are you really a Democrat?
Are you missed a bit earlier, Congressman, where Michael Moore said he's never been a dues-paying member of the Democratic Party because, and I quote, he's a fighter, not a wimp.
Well, and also the old Groucho Marx line that I would never want to belong to a club that would want me as a member. So it's that too. Go ahead, Ro. I'm sorry.
The Democratic Party, and look, I still am hopeful like Michael for tonight. But I think one of the lessons is that the Democratic Party needs to channel a little bit of Michael Moore of 2016, where he talked about the hollowing out of manufacturing, industries leaving, what we have done to shaft the working and middle class in this country. Instead of just blaming Donald Trump, what we need to understand is why is his grievance appealing to people when you've had the financialization of the economy, manufacturing firms' profits are down 50%. Financial firms have doubled their profits over the last 40 years. Districts like mine have $12 trillion in market value. That steel, aluminum, auto manufacturing has all been offshore. The working class is hurting. And we didn't tell a story. We did bullet points. We want to build, $25,000 for housing. We want to have Medicare expanded for grandparents. No, what is the story we're telling? We got to first identify, you've gotten shafted, you've gotten screwed. This country hasn't worked for you. The economy hasn't worked for you. Both parties screwed it up. They shipped your jobs overseas for profits. And here's what we're going to do. Here's what President Biden's doing. And here's what we're going to do to build it back. And we didn't tell that story.
Congressman, how worried are you tonight? Michael says we should not get freaked out. But I'll be honest, when I look at the New York Times modeling saying 89% Trump chance of not just an electoral college victory, but a popular vote victory, surely you as someone who went to Michigan, campaigned for Harris in recent weeks, what do you make of some of these numbers that we're seeing tonight?
Some of the polls I'm seeing is that she's losing Dearborn. What she should have done is showed up to Dearborn. I mean, we were begging her, go to Dearborn, go to engage with the Arab and Muslim American community. I mean, out of one of her events.
Yeah, it's looking like Trump has done well in Dearborn, and we saw him turn up in Dearborn and get applauded by some Arab Americans who fell for his anti-war shtick. But of course, that was a lane that the Democratic Party, Michael, and you and I discussed this on the show just the other day. That was a lane that the Democratic Party and the leadership of the Democrat, not present company excluded, but the leadership of the Democratic Party left open for Trump.
Tonight, but I would love to come back, and I would like to present what I would do if I was running the Democratic Party, because we have it so good that the majority, vast majority, 50, 60, 70% of the country on some of these issues like gun control, 90%, the people are with us. We are the majority, and we never act like it. And the fact that you mentioned pull up to the hangar but not go meet the Arab and Muslim people in Detroit. I begged for this for 3 months. You know this. I was on your show. I've been on other shows saying the same thing. That airport that the Harris jet backs up into for the airport rally is literally maybe 2 miles from the nearest mosque in a town with tens of thousands of Arab American voters. And nothing other than to tell the people who are there protesting, now I'm talking, you be quiet, point the finger at them. And the people that were there that day in the airport hangar just down the road from the mosque. By the way, one of numerous mosques in the Detroit area.
Yeah.
The wagging of the finger these weren't Palestinian and Arab only protesters. There were dozens, I think maybe even a couple hundred people from Jewish Voice for Peace. Those were Jews that she was telling to be quiet. That never gets reported. We in Michigan, we grew up with a large Jewish community and a large Arab community, and we all not only got along, we fought together for civil rights, for unions, for all the things Roe was just talking about, the things that we need to stand up for the average American. And the average American in the Detroit area, in the Flint area, would look to the local Arab leaders, the local Jewish leaders. I asked the campaign, would you please go back to Dearborn and Detroit and ask two incredible Jewish Detroit leaders who are for peace to stand on the stage with you next to two Arab Muslim leaders for peace and say, we are all in this together. We want the killing to stop.
Yeah, I think.
And when I'm president, civilians, innocent civilians, are not going to be killed. American public,
I think she wanted to avoid
with your bombs.
Michael, I think she wanted to avoid a photo op where she was going to get heckled. I think they were afraid of protest. Roe is right that she should have just gone there and taken it. It's interesting, Congressman, that when we talk about Michigan, we talk about Muslim Arab Americans, but right now she's not got a big lead in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania either. We're still waiting for some vote drops from Philadelphia County. We have a lot more, mail-in ballots, etc. to come. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But clearly she's not winning big numbers in places like Georgia, Arizona. North Carolina has already been called for Trump. You came on my show a few weeks ago and said that she should have taken 3 issues and said, here's how I'll be different to Joe Biden. And yet she did the opposite. She had all this energy and optimism around her in August and July when she comes in. There's a whole, Americans love change. Americans love new stuff. So you have a shiny new candidate. She has all this benefit of the doubt. And then she goes on TV shows and says, no, I wouldn't do anything different to Joe Biden. That kind of killed a lot of her energy, didn't it?
The dirty secret of American politics is ideas matter. Substance matters. Why do you and Michael Moore have a platform? It's not because you're just eloquent or you say things well. It's because you have a point of view. You're talking about concrete positions. And I think on the Middle East, I don't think it's just been hurt with Muslim American or Arab Americans. I think people wanted to know, how are we going to change our foreign policy? It's obviously been a disaster for 1 year. You've had 40,000 plus people killed. You have the hostages still not released. You have the war escalating into Lebanon and Gaza. You've got a war escalating into Iran. And what they wanted, I think the vice president is saying is, I know it's not working. We're going to have a new approach. When I'm going to be president, here's how we're going to get the killing to stop. Here's how we're going to get the war to stop. That's going to be my first priority, to get the war to stop and get those hostages home. And I just think that because we should not allow Donald Trump, which was total BS, to run as the anti-war candidate. We shouldn't allow him to run as the pro-manufacturing candidate.
But Congressman, you did, right? Your party did. And I think a lot of people watching, both here in America, and we've got viewers watching on YouTube around the world, they all want to know why. Why is it Kamala Harris and her team could not see what you see, what Michael sees, what people who know nothing about politics see, which is, oh, wow, you're cratering with Arab Americans in a crucial state. Oh, wow, you're cratering with young voters in a crucial state. Why would she not budge? Is it simplistic to say AIPAC? Is it because of cowardice? Is it because of institutional caution? No. What is it in your view, Congressman?
Can I answer this?
Let me get the Congressman, and then I'll give you the last word, Michael.
Let me give one line, and then I'm going to ask the Mehdi Hassan question. Mehdi, you were petting the op-eds when Biden was there saying, let's all get behind Kamala Harris. Let's get behind Kamala Harris. I think there was a progressive coalescing around her also before she had to take the hard positions. But I think I think in retrospect we should have pushed harder on that.
But you're not answering my question. Why has she not moved on this? A lot of people do not understand, what is it about your party that you will not budge on this issue?
I think there's a conventional wisdom. I don't think it was the money. Obviously, she had so much money. I don't think that was it. I think there's a conventional wisdom that if she were to take a more anti-war stance, that she would be seen as weak on national security, that she would lose Jewish voters, that she would lose evangelical voters, mainstream voters, suburban moderate voters, the voters that, mythically we thought campaigning with Liz Cheney would get us. I've looked at the early recruits. There's no evidence that any Republican women are voting for us. I mean, if we pull this out, it's going to be because of the great organization of our own votes in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. But I just think it was a misguided strategy for this mythical suburban moderate vote to convince them to come for us, that we weren't willing to take a harder stance on it.
Michael Moore, last word to you.
Mehdi, I have two last words, if you'll give me the time.
That shocks me that you have more than one last word, Michael. I'm shocked.
Oh, okay. I want to speak to this last question, and then I want to just close by saying something to the people watching us who are, I think, going to have a very hard time sleeping tonight, and I don't want them to have a hard time sleeping. So this is how I'm going to end. Let me just say this. You're asking, why didn't she do that? I don't know. Have you ever met her? Have you ever met Kamala Harris?
I have not. No.
Yeah, she's really a nice person and a good person and a good heart. And Roe knows this because they're both Californians, which means Californians are generally just kind of nicer, kinder people with good hearts. You can walk in the middle of the street in California and they'll just stop their car and not run you over. It's a culture. Both my sisters live in California. They've lived there since they got out of the snow in Michigan when they were 18. She's the embodiment, I think, of a lot of what's great about California and why it's such an important state to our culture, to us as human beings. And I think she was not ever going to throw Joe Biden under the bus. She was not going to be disloyal to somebody who gave her this chance. During the only debate that she was in with him, she eviscerated him on the issue of how her and her sister were being bused in Oakland, California, to stop segregated schools in the Bay Area. And that at the time, Joe Biden was trying to stop that, was trying to stop desegregation there. And she remember this, and she went right at him. And when he announced that she was going to be his vice presidential candidate, I thought, wow, now he is a good guy, because most politicians would never give her that.
Yeah.
And the fact that then her campaign, I don't want to say it's her, would not allow a Palestinian American on the stage of the Democratic convention. That's not the Democratic Party. That's not the way a Californian behaves. Californians will give the stage to 47 people.
Yeah, it was a major error.
Oh, it was such a bad karma, but bad politics, but really it was immoral to not allow that woman from Georgia, where there are 77,000 Arab and Muslim Americans voters.
And Georgia is not looking good tonight either. We talk a lot about Michigan and Arab Americans.
I'm just saying that this came back to bite the party only for a little bit, though, because we don't know how this is going to end up tomorrow. And I'm wearing my original Beatles shirt because I thought, well, this is going to be a historic night or day tomorrow. And I'm going to wear this piece of history here from the Ed Sullivan Theater in February of 1964.
Wow.
So, I'm very optimistic about how this could turn out in the next 24 hours. And I want people I'll close with this.
Yeah, go on. We've got another guest waiting, Michael. Sorry to cut you off, but go on, finish your point. Michael, finish your point, the optimistic point.
No, I know. I'm just trying to get the, here's what I'll just, the year I was born, Irving Berlin, great composer, wrote a song, and he put it in White Christmas, the movie White Christmas. And so I'll just close with this. To those of you who I want you to get a good night's sleep, we have to wake up tomorrow. We have to continue the fight, and we have to have our first woman in the White House. So this is how I'll close, with this song that he wrote. When you're worried and you can't sleep, just count your blessings instead of sheep. and you'll fall asleep counting your blessings. Have a good night, everyone. Thank
Wow.
you, Mehdi,
I
for
didn't think
having
I'd
me
ever
on.
have
This
Michael
is why
Moore
I love Michael Moore.
singing live
California.
on the Zeteo election coverage, giving us something to cheer about as the New York Times tells us a fascist presidency is coming. Michael Moore, Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you both for your time on what is, whatever happens, going to be a historic night. We're going to go straight to our next guest who's been waiting to come on. Activist, actor, Zeteo contributor, award winner, Cynthia Nixon joins me live now from New York City. Cynthia, thank you for joining us on Zeteo's live election coverage. What are you making of the night so far?
Well, I've been, as people like to say, nauseously optimistic all day, and now I'm pretty much just nauseous.
Yes, same.
But I really think it's very important. This is not a slam dunk. This is not, women coming out of the woodwork, from nowhere in battalions to usher her into office in a sweep. But again, we're really, it's far from over. We've got these battleground states, which I guess all but North Carolina, North Carolina is being called, but still very close. And the Harris campaign is saying things like, in the next few hours, there's a massive vote dump, in and around Philadelphia that's about to come, and just sit tight. And as everybody has been predicting for months and months, it's going to be incredibly close, and it's just razor thin margins. So we all have to, I think, hope for the best and bare knuckle it and not lose hope and just wait for those numbers to come out.
As you're speaking, the New York Times model just pushed up the chance of a Trump victory from 89% to 90%. So the nausea continues.
Fantastic.
How much are you thinking about 2016 right now? Because that was a night where Democrats were perhaps over-optimistic, thinking, well, there's no way Trump can win and it's Hillary's to lose. And there are some people who look at the Harris campaign and say it started off with such energy and joy and optimism and talk of change, not just on Gaza, but on other issues. And then it became a conventional Democratic Party campaign. It became Hillary Clinton 2.0. In fact, they went out of their way to recruit right-wingers, the Liz Cheneys of this world. I remember she went on TV and she said, I'll make sure I put a Republican in my cabinet. This is a woman who wouldn't allow a Palestinian on stage at the DNC, but says, I'm going to put a Republican in my cabinet.
I'll shoot you if you show up, break into my house.
Yes, I own a gun and I want a lethal military. It was very much a conventional Democratic Party. Let's tack to the center right as quickly as possible to get those suburban moms and quote unquote Nikki Haley voters. And I don't know if you just caught the end of that discussion with Congressman Ro Khanna. He's saying he's not seeing in any numbers that he's seen that there's been some big flock of centrist Republican women voters to the Democratic Party, sadly.
Yes, I mean, I think, look, we were all, back in the summer, we were all so despondent about Joe Biden, and it seemed just impossible that he could be reelected. And so when she came in, it seemed like a miracle. It's like a breath of fresh air, saving us. And I do think that there was if you want to even just talk about the issue of Gaza, there was a very decided break from what Joe Biden had been saying to even just affirming the humanity of the Palestinian people and speaking with empathy about the atrocities and the deaths and the starvation. That it was the first time we were hearing that from the White House. And it seemed a precursor to more and more substantial things in that area when it came to foreign policy and what she would do. And then after a few weeks, it all just dried up. And it does seem like, something happened. Some big donors came in there and said, you're not allowed to speak about that. And so in the last really just few days, we've finally seen her return to some of that empathetic rhetoric and, addressing Arab Americans, addressing Muslim Americans, addressing the horror and the illegality of what's happening in Gaza and now the West Bank and Lebanon. But it's really too little too late. And I think it's very crucial, certainly when you talk about a state like Michigan, but I think it's also emblematic of her, whether that's her or her handlers or her donors or whoever it is, sort of corralling her and not letting her actually break with Joe Biden, not her actually say her own opinions, not actually really cut out a figure for herself that let voters see who she was. And I think there were such ups, so many of us have been begging and screaming and trying to get her to move on this issue and say something on this issue, because just
Yes.
morally and in every way how important it is. But also, if you're simply only concerned about votes, it seems so clear to all of us that this was shooting yourself in the foot, or even in a more vital part of the body.
Shooting yourself all over the body right now. I'm looking at the numbers. It's election day numbers, it doesn't count early voting, mail-in, but election day numbers, which obviously are biased towards the Republicans, but still, out of Dearborn, Michigan, Cynthia, Trump at 45%, Jill Stein at 33%,
and Jill Stein at 33,
Harris at 15%. So Donald Trump got triple as many votes on election day in Dearborn, Michigan, Arab American capital of the United States, as Kamala Harris, where Joe Biden won big in 2020. The Democratic vote absolutely collapsed. And not just collapsed and went to Stein, but people they're willing to give Trump a chance, a man who, has made it very clear he's anti-Arab, he's anti-Muslim, he's fine with blowing stuff up in the Middle East, he's not an anti-war candidate. But the Democrats allowed him to cosplay as an anti-war candidate.
Yeah, I mean, right. I think this is one of the particularly insidious and brilliant things about Donald Trump, is he locates an actual problem that the Democrats are ignoring. He puts his finger on it, and then he takes those incredibly vulnerable, incredibly in pain people and lies to them about that he's going to solve their problem for them. And I think that this is what, Trump was doing in Michigan. He was meeting with imams. He was, saying, I'll end the war and I'll fix it. It'll all be great. Very much the same as when he first ran in 2016, as he said to really struggling, poverty-stricken, disenfranchised voters, white and otherwise, I'm gonna make America great again, which meant you're gonna have jobs. Industry is gonna come back. All of this stuff that was, and actually he located the problem, but then he just completely lied to people about what he was going to do or what he was going to make possible.
Very much so. Last question to you, Cynthia. You heard Michael Moore end his segment singing a song about how he keeps optimism and hope alive. If things go badly, and they haven't gone badly yet, we don't have a final result, but it's not looking great. How do you keep hope alive, Cynthia?
It's I feel that so many people in this country and all over the world have done their best to ring every alarm bell possible about what the stakes were in this election. And I guess my only hope really is when I look at all the good that came when Trump was elected the first time, how, when we had a president like Barack Obama, we were like, he's got it. We can sit back and relax. And when we had Trump, we mobilized and we took to the streets, and people, like me, but also more importantly, people who got elected like AOC, ran for office for the first time and actually said that women matter and that the working class in this country is being ground into dirt and being so susceptible to tyrants and snake oil salesmen like Donald Trump. And we have to, as a Democratic Party or as progressives, we have to offer people who are suffering economically and in every way something real. Otherwise, they're going to fall victim to this fascist ideology wrapped up in a television star billionaire.
Wrapped up indeed. Cynthia Nixon, thank you so much for taking time out on a big night.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you and hear from you as ever. Keep fighting the good fight. Appreciate your time. So that is the end of part 2 of Zeteo's election night live coverage. We all know that good things come in threes, so we will be back again for a third time at 12:30 a.m. Eastern. That is 29 minutes from now, so go take a break, grab a coffee. Don't tear your hair out, as Michael Moore said. Stay optimistic. And we'll be back at 12:30 a.m. Eastern time with author, journalist Wajahat Ali, who's been very confident that the Democrats would win tonight. So it'll be interesting to see if he's still got that confidence, or are some of these predictions and modeling wearing him down. We'll also hear from Zeteo's political correspondent, Prem Taka, who's on the ground in Pennsylvania. So don't go away. Well, go away for now, but come back at 12:30 a.m. Welcome back to Zeteo's election night special, live coverage here on YouTube. How are you feeling? I asked this question at the start of the night at 10 o'clock when we went live. Said, are you feeling nervous? I think a lot of you are feeling nauseous right now, to quote Cynthia Nixon, who I was speaking to half an hour ago. The numbers are not looking good. I mean, if you care about the future of America, if you're against fascism, the numbers are not looking good. Kamala Harris is doing less well than people thought she would, less well than Joe Biden did in many areas. And unless she wins all three blue wall states, all three swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, it is over for her presidential campaign. Joining me now to talk more about all of this and where we are tonight, election night, is journalist and author Wajahat Ali, who publishes the Left Hook Substack newsletter. Wajahat, thank you for joining me. You were the person telling a lot of people on social media, in WhatsApp groups, that you were hopeful, that you thought Harris could win, can win, will win, that Democrats would do much better than the media were giving credit for, and that actually we should all calm down. Do you still feel that way, 12:30 a.m.?
No, I was boldly, foolishly optimistic because I overestimated faith in my fellow Americans. When you look at it, I thought the margins would break in her favor, which is why I put her at 300 plus, meaning Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, all of these swing states, the 7 swing states, the way it's going right now is breaking towards Trump. I thought it would break to her. That's why I said 300 plus. The House, I predicted she would keep. I predicted I was hopeful, I was bullish on this, that they would keep the Senate, even though there was a risk, but they're going to lose the Senate. So she's going to they're going to at least keep the House. But I don't think people are realizing, Mehdi, I'm going to get mocked and trolled and ridiculed tomorrow by right-wing media. And it's okay. I put myself out there. I went on Piers Morgan's show, as you did. I said I would eat halal crow. I'll just go eat some, halal meat. I'm sure he's going to have me on. Let them mock me. You stand by your vote, you stand by your position, and then you fall on your sword.
Well, now you're going to the other extreme. You're acting like she's lost already. She hasn't lost yet.
No. I'm saying if it happens,
yeah.
She hasn't lost yet. What could be very interesting is she wins Pennsylvania barely. She wins Michigan barely. Wisconsin isn't looking that good. Arizona, I'm just saying, because it's not over yet. We don't know. She could also win Arizona, Nevada. It could be wild. She could barely win still, but it's a very narrow path. I think what's disappointing to you and me is that it should not have come to this.
Yes.
We assumed and we had hoped that the margins would be in her favor, especially as we've seen the vulgarity, the criminality, the racism, the xenophobia of Donald Trump just in the past 2 weeks.
Yes.
And if you see the numbers, men of color, the Trump won the way they wanted to win, in the sense that enough men of color broke for her. She didn't get the enthusiastic support that they needed to balance that. White voters, she only won, I think, with white college-educated women. So, America, if he does win, is going to learn the hard way. And I don't know what the conversations you've been having, Mehdi. You and I are on the target of MAGA. They don't like us. And my parents are visiting.
Really?
And my father sincerely is saying, Wajahat, how are you going to keep yourself and your family safe? Which is something that many of our white colleagues who treat this as a game, they don't have these conversations, maybe, that you and I have with their family members.
Which is interesting, because the white colleagues are also threatened, whether they like it or not. You saw Donald Trump just a few days ago suggesting that he's fine with people shooting through the media in order to get to him. I think we saw a lot of threats against the media. CNN journalists, others got death threats. People were arrested for trying to incite violence. I think we're going to see a lot more of that if he wins. I think you're right that people are going to be wondering, what do we do now? Look, let's just cut to the chase and deal with the halal elephant in the room. A lot of Muslims voted for Trump tonight in places like Dearborn. I'm looking at numbers out of Dearborn showing Trump at 45%, Stein in the 30s, Harris in the teens. We're looking at 3-1 Trump to Harris. I didn't see that coming. I thought Muslims would not vote for Harris because they are genuinely, understandably outraged and upset. Plus, there was this strategy to try and show some kind of political leverage to teach the Democrats a lesson, all of which I understand and get, and you and I have argued about it, debated about it before. But I genuinely didn't think Trump would get more votes in a place like Dearborn than both Jill Stein and Kamala Harris.
I wasn't surprised by Dearborn. I'm waiting to see when the total number of Muslim votes come. I still think Kamala will get the majority.
Nationwide, you mean?
Yeah, nationwide. But look, he said, she said, coulda, woulda, shoulda. This, in all seriousness, I know there'll be a lot of finger pointing, but Kamala Harris is a thoroughly qualified woman who in 2.5 months assembled a pretty good campaign. She has mistakes. One of the big mistakes, and let's see, Gaza, not having a Palestinian American speaker at the DNC. You and I have talked about it. Not visiting Dearborn. Some people will say she should have picked Josh Shapiro. I think Josh Shapiro would have brought more baggage than Tim Walz. I think this is an issue of disinformation. I think this is an issue of realignment. I think this is an issue of a Black woman running. I think this is the issue of a lot of the bro culture that has just seeped away and taken away a lot of men. And I feel, Mehdi, that our establishment and our institutions have failed. A lot of corporate media, not you. You have warned people about the threats, but you and I have talked to so many people who have said, the system will hold. Even as of last week, it'll be okay. There's checks and balances. The one good news is that they held the Senate. They held the Senate, the House. The Senate's probably going to be 48-52, which isn't good, but it isn't like, let's see, maybe, if people want to win their election again. But the problem is Donald Trump said he will terminate the Constitution, be a dictator for a day, and he has Project 2025.
I mean, if the Democrats take back the House from the Republicans and Mike Johnson, that will be one bit of silver lining. But let's be honest, controlling one institution when the Republicans control the Senate, the presidency, and crucially the Supreme Court, and you have a Donald Trump who doesn't care about any guardrails or institutional limits, and the few adults in the room from 2016 to 2020 will not exist in this term. There's a party going on in Mar-a-Lago tonight, and basically that's the new ruling class. It's Tucker Carlson,
Musk, Joe Rogan,
it's Elon Musk, it's Tucker Carlson, it's the Trump kids, it's all of the usual suspects. Basically the worst people in America emboldened and empowered, which is very worrying, both from a constitutional and legal perspective, but also from a kind of moral and social fabric perspective. AP is reporting, Waj, that Kamala Harris is not planning to speak tonight. Donald Trump is planning to speak tonight.
It's a reboot of 2016. Not a good sign.
Even 2020 in a way where, at least in 2020, he lost and claimed victory. Now he can genuinely say he's in the lead, but I suspect he would just say he's won.
Yeah. I think the fact that he's going to speak, even if he does, this is what's scary. So since they haven't declared a victory, right? This is my scenario. Wisconsin's not looking good. Suppose she barely wins Pennsylvania, but not by the numbers, right? Suppose she barely takes Michigan, which is possible. Suppose she barely takes Arizona and Nevada. That gives her the path to 270 plus. But Arizona, a lot of Republicans, Mehdi, and what I'm worried about is 2000 all over again. Remember the Supreme Court? But either way, the fact that she's not speaking, a redux of 2016, not a good sign. And when they send people home, not a good sign. And it is something really painful that we saw this in 2016 and 9 years later, when regardless of what you think about Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, compared to Donald Trump, maybe, qualified women and the United States of America. Look, we come from South Asia. Our family does.
Yeah.
You have a lot of problems in South Asian countries. Our people have elected female leaders, Mehdi.
Yes.
And I think the power of racism
in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan,
Sri Lanka, Philippines, Southeast, just go down, Nepal. I feel like there's something about racism and misogyny which will come up. Look, Black people did their job, but there's something has to be said about Latinos breaking for Trump in this way, and white women breaking for Trump. And I wish no one, in a lot of suburban people of color, friends of ours, that they quietly went for Trump. I wish no ill will towards anyone, but if Trump wins and it's going to be his administration, you and I have spent 9 years following Trump. We know exactly who he is. We know who is in his orbit. We know their thoughts, their plans, their ideas. People of color and women are going to go through some things, Mehdi. And so the question is, how best can we resist? And can we resist a dictator? I don't know.
No, it's a question that some of us have been wondering about for years. Even when I was at MSNBC for 3.5 years, I spent a lot of time at the network covering the fascist threat from Trump. This was during the Biden presidency, trying to get Democrats to take this seriously, get rid of the filibuster, rebalance the court, take measures before the Republicans come back, before the pendulum swings back. Who knew it would swing so quick and to Trump? I don't think anyone would have imagined on January 7th, 2021, that Donald Trump would be the candidate again in 24 and be winning. And not just winning, Waj. I mean, NBC News is projecting, according to their exit poll, that Trump has made gains with Black and Latino voters in the blue wall states. NBC News is also projecting that he has won Georgia. That was a state. I mean, the irony of Trump winning Georgia. Georgia is one of the places he should have been on trial. He should have seen the inside of a courtroom, but he didn't, because he's the luckiest man in the world. We heard him on tape, on a phone call, say, find me 11,000 votes. Waj, if you and I had made that call to Brad Raffensperger, we would be in prison right now. We would not be
Look,
almost about to become president-elect.
I hate saying I've been wrong. I know you hate saying I've been wrong. I'm gonna just get destroyed and pummeled, which is fine. You fall on your sword. But I feel worse about the country, Mehdi. I don't mind. Mock me, ridicule me, all good. I think there are a lot of people with eggs on their faces because we expected more from our country, right? Because of exactly what you said, January 6th, Roe v. Wade, that should have done it. Criminal, held liable for rape, that should have done it. Performing fellatio on a microphone, that should have done it. And maybe, just maybe, this guy is just untouchable. Like, he's Teflon.
If he wins the popular vote too, that's going to be a huge win for his party and for his ego, because up until now, I was able to say with a straight face, hey, he won the presidency in 2016, but both elections he lost a popular vote. He was rejected by America. And you started this interview saying, well, maybe you got it wrong because you had too much faith in your fellow Americans. Sitting over your right shoulder is your book, your memoir, Go Back to Where You Came From. It is a hope-filled memoir, despite describing a lot of struggles and challenges. You're now saying, well, you know what? What do you do to live in America, which A, could be becoming a dictatorship, and B, filled with millions of people who want it? They're craving it.
Yeah.
Our neighbors, colleagues, and friends.
And you know what? I think a lot of people underestimate racism. We don't. A lot of people underestimate misogyny. We don't. A lot of people underestimate disinformation. And I'm very curious to see the hand that Russia and other bad faith actors play, because you might say, oh, Wajad, Russia. Multiple fake bomb threats, Mehdi, in all blue counties, in Georgia and other places that have delayed the counting of the vote.
We haven't even talked about Elon Musk and his $1 million daily lottery. Richest man in the world went to bat for Trump in Pennsylvania. Is sitting in Mar-a-Lago tonight, has been promised a big government job, not to mention tax cuts and deregulation. I remember a few years ago having an argument with two family members of mine in Texas who said, oh, you can't compare Musk to Trump. This was before he had bought Twitter, and I said, he's as bad as Trump in many ways. I actually think he's worse than Trump in some ways. But we can't discount the fact that a lot of bros who went for Trump did so. A lot of young men. Trump is doing much better with young men than imagined. A lot of them went for Trump because of Musk and Joe Rogan and some of these other folks. Is that fair?
Yeah, and Rogan broke for Trump. We always knew he would. Would that be enough? It could be. Look, there's a realignment in America where people don't trust the establishment anymore. That's a fact. Republicans, I think, unfortunately and cynically, even though they represent the swamp, have jumped on it, right? Mocking the deep state, mocking law enforcement, mocking corporate media, even though they are corporate media. And I also think, we have to call out the failure of our institutions not to aggressively prosecute criminals. I think Merrick Garland will go down as one of the worst attorney generals. The fact that he just sat there and did nothing, I think Biden's decision to put in someone as milquetoast as Merrick Garland is going to burn us. But listen, Joe Biden has the ability to do something wild in the final 2 months of his presidency. The Supreme Court gave the president absolute immunity for actions committed within the scope of his duties. I mean, bum rush as many progressive policies as you can. Put them in there. Let's see. Like through executive order, Mehdi, try your best to build enough of a firewall. And this is me being hopeful. But what do they've got to lose? And one thing I think they'll prove that you and I have been saying is Democrats have to play hardball. And now you have to play hardball literally to survive.
To survive. You will have to play hardball in defense. To survive. In self-defense. You mentioned Biden. One last thing to you. There was a conspiracy theory, I don't know how much of a conspiracy theory it is anymore, that Joe Biden actually wanted Kamala Harris to lose. And there's historical precedent for this. LBJ in 1968, Hubert Humphrey, his vice president, ran in his place and lost narrowly to Nixon. Humphrey later told people, I think LBJ wanted Nixon to win, not me. Is there a sense that Joe Biden tonight is going to be going, well, told you, shouldn't have got rid of me? Is there going to be a sense of his bruised ego, his thin skin, 82-year-old man who got pushed aside? Is there going to be a sense of him saying, you should have kept me? Even though, to be clear, I think they would have done even worse tonight had they kept him.
Yeah, I mean, look, woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? You go by your gut. She had momentum. She had energy. We saw, President Biden, even the final week, good God, when he tried to do that Zoom call, we saw what happened.
The garbage stuff.
Yeah, the garbage gaffe. So it just could be that this is, look, and the flip side of that, Mehdi, look how terrible of a campaign Donald Trump ran in the last 2 weeks. Performed fellatio, dressed up as a garbage man, mocked Puerto Ricans, promised violence against the press, said women, I'll protect you whether you like it or not, criminal, held liable for rape. I mean, it's the first time that Alan Lichtman's own keys will fail. And he's like, what? So it is a huge realignment. I mean, I think this is the country that Black people have known. A lot of Black folks aren't that shocked. If you've been watching on social media, Nicole Hannah Jones of 1619 Project just tweeted out, we're going to wake up in the same country that we've always had. So, and the fact that, woulda, coulda, shoulda, held a primary, this and that, I don't think it would have mattered, Mehdi.
Yeah, even the argument that it was the genocide might apply in Michigan, but it doesn't explain why Harris has done so badly in New York and New Jersey. She's won those states, but with very narrow margins compared to Joe Biden. There's something broader going on in American politics, and I think we need to accept, as you said at the start of the interview, we had a lot of faith in Americans that maybe was misplaced. A lot of Americans are totally fine with the end of democracy, totally fine with fascism, totally fine with racism. That is the sad reality of where we are tonight, especially the way Trump ended his campaign. He went full bore racism, fascism, misogyny, and seems to be winning tonight. On that note, Wajahat Ali, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate you. All right. Who should we talk to next? Let's talk to Zeteo's very own political correspondent, Prem Thacker, who joins me from Pennsylvania. Prem, you are where it's all happening, Pennsylvania. You were there since last couple of days reporting on the ground. Did you sense what was coming or what seems to have come our way?
Several voters I talked to throughout the past couple of days have just been, even if they were enthusiastic, apathetic, exhausted, tired of the election. One thing that gets me over and over again is that this is the 9th year in a row that Donald Trump is running for president. As we noted in our story just the other day, that means first-time voters, 18-year-olds, have spent half their lives in the country for which one of two major political parties is just not led by Donald Trump, but dominated by it.
Yes.
And so just over the course of 9 years, you get to this point where as Trump continues to exist in public life, and the more that's just normalized, you get to this point where it's not maybe unsurprising that this sort of thing can happen. But, a lot of voters beyond this broader sense of exhaustion, just to give you some color, every other radio ad in a vehicle would be a Harris or Trump ad. There were signs plastered on every street corner with Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, and Martin Luther King's face calling on people to defend democracy. Several people I spoke with were very apathetic, very just exhausted from it all. And so that was sort of the background of Election Day here in Philadelphia.
You mentioned the exhaustion. I mean, that was the argument in the summer, right? The people are tired of Biden and Trump. They're the most unpopular candidates. I remember Nikki Haley saying whoever switches out their candidate first will win. The Democrats did it. A lot of us thought, wow, smart move. Republicans are now stuck with old, incoherent, annoying Trump who people don't like. Kamala Harris has new energy and hope and optimism. And yet people got exhausted of her too, I guess. People, as you say, fed up of politics, fed up of the two-party system, and not, she certainly wasn't the change candidate in the end. She was supposed to be the change candidate. The whole point of changing your leader and candidate is to represent change. But then she went on TV shows and said, yeah, I'd have done everything the same as Joe Biden.
Yeah. And of course, we don't want to speak too soon.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, she's down 150,000 votes, I think, in Pennsylvania right now, and there's still a little under 1 million to go across the state. At the same time, there's only about 23%, I believe, left in Philly still to count, and that's the site of her final rally. Sure, as we saw in 2020, there was this red mirage with votes coming in over the course of days that pushed Biden over the edge. But I think what's causing a lot more concern this time is that Harris is down nationwide, across demographically. There's been this massive rightward shift. And I think there are a few things that we need to keep in mind as we think about what went wrong, if indeed it does end up going wrong tomorrow or over the coming days. There's this baseline, yes, of course, of racism and misogyny, but more broadly, of leaders across the globe, really, regardless of ideology, and in some cases, losing amid this sort of post-pandemic inflation bubble. And Biden, fairly or not, was massively unpopular in part due to his association with this bubble. So to your point, Harris, when she becomes the nominee 108 odd days ago, had this fortuitous momentary blip of momentum, unprecedented, really. And the first few weeks, she surges all over the country.
Yep.
But then after those first few weeks, there had been compounding decisions that were just so incredibly notable. First, the move to sort of toss out the line of calling Republicans weird that really, sailed Tim Walz to be VP in the first place. Then making Liz Cheney her functional second VP. I believe in October, she appeared with Liz Cheney more than any other surrogate on the trail.
Insane.
Then you see the campaign sending Bill Clinton last week, 7 days ago, to Michigan to lecture people mourning their families. They didn't throw a bone to uncommitted voters at the DNC. They decided to be diet Republicans on issues like immigration in an election where, when things like immigration and inflation scratch an itch for voters, if you want to give them an opposition to that, you need to give them an affirmative opposition. Otherwise, if they're feeling scratched, why would they choose for a diet option instead of the real thing? And of course, importantly, the campaign repeatedly dismissed opportunities to differentiate herself from Biden, taking us back to that first point. And I think that's important, back to your point, because this election in July was shaping up to essentially just be a referendum on how people felt about Biden. And so to then, in some ways, replicate those conditions towards the very end.
Yeah.
I mean, just in the past few weeks, over and over again, Harris saying,
yeah,
actually, I wouldn't do that much differently than Biden, or there wasn't that much I regretted from that time.
No, you know what she said? She said, here's something I would do differently to Joe Biden. I'd put a Republican in my cabinet.
Exactly.
And as you just said, and as you tweeted an hour ago, why vote for a diet Republican when you can vote for the real thing? That is a problem Democrats have had for a long time. I remember going back to Jesse Jackson was saying similar stuff. We have one party in this country, the Republicans and Republican light. And this has always been a problem for the Democratic Party, that they're always playing catch up with the Republicans. They're always in a defensive posture. And this is what I would say to a lot of my fellow Muslims who are hoping for a Harris defeat to teach the Democrats a lesson. Be careful what you wish for. I don't think the Democrats are going to wake up, and I've been warning this for months. Democrats are not going to wake up tomorrow morning if they've lost and say, damn it, we should have been a little bit more pro-Muslim. We should have been more pro-Palestinian. Oh, we should have offered Medicare for all. No, they're going to say, oh, the country wants fascism. We should be a little bit more fascistic. We should be tougher on border. We should be less woke. We should crack down on, abortion rights, transgender rights, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's what the Democrats will have always done when they lose. And I think they're going to do that again. And therefore, we're going to have two parties, which, as you say, Republican light.
Yeah. And of course, we have sort of proximity bias to thinking it's as bad as it can be, but it really does feel like this is an untenable moment. I mean, there's only so much more that this can go on for, especially if this does indeed help lead to Donald Trump's ascendance and the Senate's ascendance. You have Supreme Court seats at stake. You have the fact that by 2030, there are climate goals that this country is far and away from.
Yeah.
And under a Trump administration, obviously that we will not get any closer to achieving those goals. And so it is becoming increasingly more
he says that we'll have the best water and air.
That is true. I did forget to consider that part. So
let me ask you this.
Some hope under Trump administration.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned proximity bias, and people say, well, it can't get any worse. And I hear that line on Gaza all the time. Mehdi, how can you say it'll get any worse? How can it be worse than genocide? Well, actually, you could have a genocide in the West Bank. You could have resettlement of Gaza. You could have full-on war with Iran, et cetera, et cetera. It can get worse. I suspect, sadly, it will get worse. You are a reporter who's been covering Gaza and American policy on Gaza probably more closely than anyone else. It's one of the reasons we hired you. You became a star in that briefing room, putting Matthew Miller through the motions. January 2025. It's not Matthew Miller who's State Department spokesman. It's some MAGA guy. It's some pro-Israel Christian evangelical. What are you going to be asking then? What are they going to be doing then? Give us a picture of what U.S. foreign policy could look like under a Trump, Vance, Kushner administration.
It's so jarring to even think about. I mean, especially given the time today. Of course, we saw what happened with Yoav Gallant, the so-called painted moderate,
yes,
who, of course, is facing his own possible ICC warrants being pushed out on the same day as the election, as if that didn't make it any clearer. It's very difficult to sort of parse through. On one hand, you could imagine Prime Minister Netanyahu moving to just go ahead and finish things up, just because Trump's back in office. He can get American favors in so many other ways. On the other hand, you could imagine this being a permission slip to vastly accelerate the devastation and horrors we're seeing in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and so forth. I think it's difficult to predict exactly which way it'll go. I think one thing's for sure, if they do choose to hit the acceleration pedal, that we've already seen such horrors. It's unimaginable what can come. It's just, we've seen sort of the veneers of respect for international law and respect on the global stage in a certain extent in the briefing room and settings like that. Of course, many times we see that being absolutely just a blatant disregard in practice. I can't even imagine what, for instance, a Trump spokesperson, for example, would have said in response to the horrors we've seen over the past year, of course, funded by that same government. It's just so hard to predict. And I think over the coming days, if the election turns out as we think it will, we'll see the incentive structures. And I think one thing that's underrated is that many people have sort of gestured towards this idea that if this happened under Trump administration, you could have imagined a lot more opposition amongst more establishment centers of Democratic power if this was happening under Donald Trump. And so I'd be curious to see, especially if the Democrats do take the House, how the House as a whole will respond, given that overall we've maybe had less than half the House even call for a ceasefire unequivocally. And so if Donald Trump is president and the horrors do continue, how will that change not only the president's incentive structures, but also the Democrats in Congress's structure?
Very good point. Although I think it's less than a fifth of the House has called for a ceasefire, less than half of House Democrats. Let's see what Speaker Jeffries, if he is Speaker Jeffries, does. Prem, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your reporting from Pennsylvania. See you back in DC soon. That was Prem Tacker, our political correspondent, live from Pennsylvania. Look, people who say it can't get any worse, it can get worse. People who say it can't happen here, it can happen here. Is fascism at the doorstep? Yes. Is fascism about to enter the White House? That's what it's looking like so far at 1 a.m. Eastern, but it's not over. Harris can still win the presidential election if she wins the 3 blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. She won't be speaking tonight, but Donald Trump will be. I'm assuming he's going to say he's won already, which he hasn't, but things are looking much better for Donald J. Trump tonight than for Kamala Harris. There's a lot coming down the line. Prem just gave us a small preview of it. We here at Zeteo will be covering everything, whether it's a Harris presidency or a Donald Trump presidency. We will be all over it, and we need your support for that. We're ending our live coverage for tonight right now, unless something crazy happens, we'll be back on air. But for now, we're taking a break with our live coverage. If you're one of our 500,000 YouTube subscribers, thank you. But do head over to Zeteo.com and become one of our actual Zeteo subscribers, ideally one of our Zeteo paid subscribers, so you can support the work we're doing tonight, the work we're doing tomorrow, and the work we're going to be doing in 2025. Tomorrow, Wednesday, you'll be getting, if you're a Zeteo subscriber, Mehdi Unfiltered in your inbox. That'll be our show from DC, where we'll be reacting to wherever we are Wednesday afternoon. We may or may not have a result by then, but check out Mehdi Unfiltered. I'll also be speaking to Owen Jones later this week. There's a lot more coming your way. Become a Zeteo subscriber tonight. Keep hope alive. And on that note, I'm going to go cry myself to sleep. Good night.